icónica urbana no necesariamente concuerda con las opiniones aquí expresadas.
Biblio Chisme.
¿Biblio Chisme?
Yes, Biblio Chisme. What are you reading?
I'm reading a book about this.
Hello, everybody. It's time for another episode of Biblio Chisme. I'm Angela.
I'm Mao. Hello, Angela. How are you tonight?
I am absolutely fabulous, but I have been a little short-tempered lately. Like things have been annoying me, and so dear listeners, Mao is so funny.
I love you.
I love you too. So lately, unlike my usual angelic self, I have been a little short-tempered. And so my question for you today is...
So we go to the question directly, okay.
Where did you want to go instead?
It's fine.
Where do you want to go? Spain?
No,
Germany?
no.
Where should we go instead?
I thought you were going to say something about that you were having a beautiful, delicious Mexican bread for your bad temper, but
no, that's not why. The reason I'm talking about my bad temper, but yes, listeners, I'm having a concha, which is amazing, and that makes me happy. But no, the reason I'm... Huh?
The reason you're...
I'm not telling you why I'm grumpy, but the reason I'm telling you about the grumpiness is that the question today is going to be a diss, and we usually never talk negatively or talk about books that in a negative way or authors, but my question for today is geared towards the negative. So that comes from my little short-tempered person. So my question is, and you can say that you choose to plead the fifth and not answer me, but is there an author in literature that you are supposed to like that you do not?
There's an author in literature that I'm supposed to like, but I don't. I don't think so. I don't have a bad relation with any author like 18.
Anybody with the initials O or...
Well, I'm not supposed to like. The thing is, as I'm taking the question, I'm understanding like authors that are hype or that have a lot of comments that this is a great author, you should read.
Yes.
And with that specific author that starts with an O, finishes with an O.
Yeah.
Octavio Paz. I don't like him. I think he's a great. How to say? It's he knows a lot of words. He knows a lot. He was an amazingly cult man. He knew languages.
You mean cultured?
Yes, culture.
Yes, because cult is a very different word.
It's related to him.
Well,
also.
Yes, that's a different, yeah.
It's a very cultured man. He knew a lot. But he thought a lot of himself. He created a cult around him. He said he was a poet because he wrote poetry. And he did...
Well, what else is required to be a poet?
He wrote some amazing verses. There's this beautiful poem called Piedra de Sol, which is a milestone of the Mexican poetry of the 20th century. But besides that, all the other things that I've read from him in poetry are bad. Not good poetry, pretentious. I don't know. And he was not a good translator. He translated the amazing 20th poems by William Carlos Williams. And he did it in a way that, I mean, I understand that translation, it's very complicated art, and that sometimes you need to propose and give some different meanings to keep the sound, to keep the rhythm of the poem. But he just created completely new versions of the poem with lines that have nothing to do with what William Carlos Williams wanted to write. So he thought a lot of himself, and I don't like him, not as much because of his writing, but more that he was a very political. He used literature to be the center of politics in Mexican literature and culture. So I don't like that.
You didn't have to answer him just because I mentioned that. I just
no, but I mean,
wanted to give you a clue as to like what I meant.
My bad relationship with him is not because of his writing.
Okay.
Actually, I have a couple of essays by him in my personal bookshelf. I think that the most amazing work related to Sor Juana, one of the most amazing works related to Sor Juana was done by him.
Who's Sor Juana for our listeners who don't know her?
Sor Juana was a very important poet, a female poet from the 17th century, and she was like the mother of Mexican poetry and Mexican literature. Mexico didn't exist by that time. We were a colony of Spain, and she lived in the time that it's known as the Golden Age in Spanish literature, because of the poets that were living in Spain at that time. And Sor Juana was as intelligent, as great as them, and she had poetry contests with them, and they wrote letters to each other. She was an amazing character, but an amazing character, an amazing poet. She used language in a way that was completely new and relevant, and a very intelligent woman. So Octavio Paz did an amazing job researching about her life, her work, the time that she was alive, that I recognize, but I don't think that he's.
So is there a writer that you don't like the writing that you think you're supposed to?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
But because I was thinking, for example, that your question could say that you are supposed to like Shakespeare because Shakespeare is great, blah, blah, blah. And then I would say, no, I don't like Shakespeare. But no.
You don't like Shakespeare?
No. I'm giving an example of what
Why would you do that? Why would you talk about Shakespeare? You know, it hurt my feelings.
I was thinking Melville, but the name Shakespeare came out.
Well, listeners, I I do love Shakespeare, listeners, a lot. So yeah, mine is William Faulkner. Uh, and I may read him again, but every time I read him, I'm like, I'm gonna try again, and then I hate it again. And but so many people who I absolutely respect their taste and love the way that they analyze literature, love his work. And I think his stories are wonderful. Like what he writes about is so engaging. Like I want to know that story, but it takes forever. Like I just need you. And I don't mind somebody who doesn't edit if they do it well. Like Stephen King goes on forever, but I don't mean to compare Faulkner and King, but like sometimes extra words are fine. But for some reason with Faulkner, like I feel like he's just saying like there's a shadow in the darkness under the black sky of shadows beneath it's like I got it. I get it. It's dark. I get it. So I read As I Lay Dying when I was 16 and just hated it. And then I was an English major and everybody was like, Faulkner. And so I tried to read him again. No. And then I try to read him again because I just keep thinking I should like him, but I haven't enjoyed a single one of his books. But every time I look at the story, at what the book is about, I want to know that story. I just don't like it.
And you also have a bad relationship with English female writers from the 19th century, right?
I guess since you did it to me, I have to, we have to out each other in our dislikes. Yes, I don't like Edith Wharton. And the thing is, with Edith Wharton, I don't care. Like with Faulkner, I feel like I want to like his work, but I don't, yeah. And the other ones, the more classic, 18th, 19th century British literature that women are supposed to love, I don't hate it. Like I can read it and it's fine. I don't sit there and go, oh, this is terrible. It's just not amazing. It's just not like this whole thing that people love so much, like Wuthering Heights and all those books. Like, yeah, it's a good story, but it's not something that makes me excited. And like, there's so many books that are quote unquote classics. And I don't like the concept of the canon. I've said this before, but there are some books that get to you and they've gone through like, a long time of being loved because they're well written. They're good stories and it's just like a letdown. Whereas something like War of the Worlds, written in 1898, is still amazing to read today. It's still creepy. It's still awesome. The words, the poetry, I love that book. So it's that kind of a thing. It's like with that much hype, I expect it to be something that I'm just like, oh, and those works don't do that for me. So Edith Wharton is the one I don't like. The other ones I don't like. I just don't like.
Like you don't care about them.
Yeah, it's like if I read the book, I wouldn't be upset about it. It's fine story to read. It's good, but it's not like, oh, I can't. That's such a good story. I can't wait. And there's also all this like romantic tropes of like, oh, these two are in love with each other, but they can't be together, and they turn and like he looked at her, but she had to look away. Like I hate that. Like just kiss already. So but that's just me, Anyway, Thank you for coming on this journey with me on this, like, I'm grumpy, so let's talk shit about things, you know?
No, I also think that it's very important to have that. What happens to me with the case of Octavio Paz, for example, I had how do you say a biased opinion on him. I hated him as a person. I hated him as a cultural dictator in Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
But then I made myself read it.
Mm-hmm.
So, because I don't, maybe he's the most amazing Mexican writer. That's why he got the Nobel Prize. But then I can say that I don't like his work and that I think there are other Mexican writers that are more interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that it's important to recognize those things and to recognize where do you have a bias. I am very happy, very, very, very happy that I love Roberto Bolaño, um, because that's one of those authors that a lot of people uh, get angry because of his books, as well as Haruki Murakami's books. Like they hate them. They read them, but they hate them. And I'm like, why? Why do you hate them so much? And why do you keep reading an author that you don't like?
Yeah.
That's something that I don't understand. And one of the most interesting things about Roberto Bolaño and Murakami, a lot of Mexican writers of narrative tend to write stories like Bolaño and Murakami.
Mm-hmm.
Those that hate him most and that express him that they hate them, I can see the influence of their work in their writing.
But is it like, is it
very,
that hipster thing of like everybody loves this writer, so I'm not gonna like him?
I think so. So I don't see the point of hating an author so much that you need to talk shit about them. But anyways,
Yeah, I agree. And part of this question that I feel is helpful is in the way that we answered it is for people who are alive, like Murakami, I do like his writing, even though it traumatizes me. But I do like him. But we answered this question with people who aren't alive. And if I'm going to throw shade at somebody on the podcast, I'd rather do it somebody who's not alive. Just because some writers may deserve it, right? But I really am not here to do that. I'm here to like lift up writers, you know? So, you could have said somebody who was alive if you wanted to, but just for me, that's the.
I don't have that. No, I have to say that I haven't read Faulkner ever, and I love the title of As I Lay
Dying.
It's an amazing title.
I used to make the joke that I hated it so much that I lay dying as I read As I Lay Dying.
I will look at library that it's being an amazing thing that's happening in my life now. If
Yay.
the book is there and see what happens.
Yeah, tell me what you think. Okay, we need to go on a break.
Yes.
You're listening to Biblio Chisme.
And we're back. I was going to say something. We have to say hello. Thank you to David Cruz, who's listening, and he sends us a message at the chat of the website of Iconic Urbana. Thank you, David, for being there. Thank you to Del Inframundo Lotería and to Martín Méndez and Musa de Colores, as well as Aldo, Thank you so much, Aldo, for the amazing meme that you shared with us at our Twitter account. So if you want to be in touch with us, you can send us a message on Twitter. We can send us a message on Instagram, or you can send us a message in the live chat at Iconic Urbana. So my book, can I?
Yeah.
I was going to say that our dearest friend Aubrey, who will listen this in the future because she's sleeping now, she read War and Peace by Tolstoy because it's one of those books that you're supposed to read because they're amazing. And she said, when she finished, she said, it's not worth it. Don't read it. She didn't enjoy that. Maybe
No, she did not.
Something, but she did great, and she read the whole thing. And anyways,
there's a couple of those that like I still want to read that I haven't read. Like I've always wanted to read The Good Earth and the Grapes of Wrath. I haven't read that. Aubrey and I and you were supposed to read it as a book club,
and we didn't.
Well, we can do it now. Like right now, let's do it.
Not now, because there's a series of books that we. But yeah, see that has that one. Check that. So I want to talk about a book.
That's what we're here for.
I did some homework because a couple of months ago we were talking about José Saramago and his blindness, which in Spanish it's called Ensayo sobre la ceguera, an essay about blindness, which is the translation, the literary translation of the Portuguese title. And we were having a discussion off air that it was part of a trilogy, because in the US, the cover, it's I'm missing a part in my sentence. We talked about the book Seeing, which is called in Spanish Ensayo sobre la lucidez, an essay about how would you translate lucidez? That's interesting.
Being lucid. Lucid is a word in English, like being lucid, being aware.
Yeah, an essay about awareness, maybe, or about conscious, maybe will be.
Yeah.
And we were having a conversation off air if Seeing was part of the trilogy that blindness was part of. And I said, no, it's not part of the trilogy. And you said, but the cover looks almost the same in the English version. So I read Seeing, and I have an answer to that. So, blindness belongs to a trilogy that it's Blindness, All the Names, and The Cave. That's the trilogy. But then, after 10 years, because Blindness was published in 1995, and then in 2004, Seeing was published, José Saramago writes this book with a very similar title about a city somewhere in the world where they speak Portuguese. He never mentions Portugal. He never mentions Lisbon. But he talks about this place where 4 years ago we had the plague of the blindness. So it's the same country where blindness takes part. And so it's in
the same world. Yeah.
So it's the same fictitious world, and the same everything begins with an election. People goes to vote, and the results come out, and in all the country, the different political parties get elected. But in the capital of that country, the major vote was a blank vote. So by law, the government had to conduct another election. So they conduct the new election, and the winner with an 83%, it's the blank vote again. So it creates a political crisis in the country because no one gets elected. And so it starts talking about how, in a moment, societies can organize themselves, decide things, how citizens see governments so far from them that they take things on their hands. And really interesting. After 200 pages, you realize that you're in the same world than blindness.
Mm-hmm.
And after another 50 pages, you'll be talking with the same characters that you talked on blindness.
Oh.
And for that, listeners, you have to read the book because I'm not going to give any spoiler.
Ooh.
which I but it was a lovely reading. It was really interesting to read a new Saramago. I mean, new Saramago for me.
Uh-huh.
It was translated by Saramago's wife, Pilar del Rio, which also I think that's an amazing thing. Pilar del Rio started translating Saramago's work to Spanish. And I think that's amazing because she was translating the work of him. So if she had a doubt, she could just go to her husband.
What do you think?
What do you mean about? I think that's amazing.
Yeah, I can imagine that conversation, like when you and I translate things. We're like, oh, I don't think it's this, but I think it might be this. That would be a lot of fun. I have only read one Saramago book,
Mm-hmm.
The Gospel According to Jesus Christ. And I love that book. I love that book. And I started to read Blindness, and it was just, I think it was just too creepy. I didn't finish it. It was also in the time where I didn't finish books.
Blindness, it's a very creepy book. The two times that I've read it, it created the same thing to me. Like the first time that I read it, I started on a Friday night and I finished it on Sunday.
Wow.
I couldn't keep the book out of my hands. Like I just needed to know what was going to happen. Second time that I read it, many years later, was the same thing. And I knew what was going to happen.
It stressed me out to the point where I didn't want to read anymore. Like I just didn't like, because you can tell that something gross is about to happen. And like the vulnerability of people who can't see, and I just didn't want to read it anymore. Like that one I stopped. But his writing is incredible. And but yeah, the other day I was like looking at books, and I realized I hadn't finished any of his books other than The Gospel According to Jesus Christ.
He's an amazing writer. And one of the things on blindness, it's a horrible book with a lot of suffering, with a not beautiful, let's say, less creepy ending. That gives you a little bit of hope. This book that starts talking about hope and about how people not related to political parties and governments gives you a lot of hope that there's a way out of that corruption and that those games that those people play. It gives you um, a very creepy feeling at the very end.
Cool.
Like, oh my God, the world sucks. Anyways, he's a great writer. I mean,
yeah.
And it was, as I say, it was really lovely to read one of his works that I hadn't read, that are, I think that I'm missing two of the novels that have been published in Spanish. So I've read all his work. Yay.
Wow. Very
published
cool.
in Spanish.
Yeah. Okay, so we should take another break.
Let's go.
You're listening to Biblio Chisme.
And we're back, friends. It is time for me to talk about my book.
Yes.
So it's funny, when we were off air, we were talking about the fact that I've talked about the guest list on this podcast more than once. And the book I'm going to talk about today is the newest book by Lucy Foley that I couldn't wait to read it. Like, I couldn't wait to get it from the library, so I had to buy it. I just wanted to read it immediately. So her new book is called The Paris Apartment, and it is also a thriller. And so what she does so well is she creates a lot of different characters, but she has them interact in ways where you don't lose who it is. Because sometimes it's more interesting in thrillers when there are a lot of characters, but it's easy to get confused and not remember who it is. And in a thriller, you want to remember everyone because one of those people could be the killer. You never know. So I do have to say in this one, I was a little annoyed when I started reading it because the audio, I listened to it on audio, and one of the ways in the audio format that the different characters distinguish themselves is their accents. Mm-hmm. And so in the last one, there was like, this lady who was an Irish lady, and there were different kinds of British, and it was, and it was very interesting and easy to listen. In The Paris Apartment, there are a bunch of French accents that I did not enjoy. Like, they didn't sound like French accents to me, but when they spoke French like a French person. But first of all, one of my pet peeves is when you're watching a movie or you're listening to a book where somebody is from another country and they speak with an accent. They are talking in their own language in their heads, So like, you'll see a movie and where the characters are all Mexican in Mexico, but it's a movie made in English, and so they all have Mexican accents in English. Well, they're not in this concept, they're not speaking English, so like they wouldn't have an accent in their own. It's just, I don't know. Anyway. So in this one, for the most part, they are speaking English because the main characters are British. And so the other characters are speaking English to them in an accent. But when they're narrating to us with an accent. It's just, I don't know. I didn't appreciate that as much, but because it's different to have a different kind of English accent, like an Irish accent, than to have an accent that comes from another language. So sorry about all that. Aside from all of me saying
that's very interesting, because that's a way of portraying the different characters. Yes, yeah, it is. And
It is. It is a way of portraying the different characters, but
It used to.
for me it's hard to keep my like the idea when you're reading a novel, you suspend disbelief, right? You sit there and you play along with whatever the writer's writing, and the accent situation because of my life and like my relationship with languages, it just takes me outside of story a little bit. So when I started listening to it, that part was hard for me, but then it just got good because she's a great writer. So the premise is that this woman goes to Paris. She's running away from something. We don't know what she's running away from. And she shows up at her brother's apartment, which is a very nice, rich apartment. Like, it's an apartment for these really, really rich people. And she shows up looking for her brother, and he's missing. And everyone in the apartment seems to have, in the very rich apartment building, has like reasons to hate him and have like weird little backstories and secrets. And so that's what I love about Lucy Foley's books, is that like everyone has a motive. Everyone has like something that you have to discover. And then later on, sometimes the people that you thought were bad are not bad, and the people that you thought were good were bad. Like, she plays really good tricks on your mind as you're reading it. So it was great.
Lovely.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I have been so into thrillers lately. They're just fast to read, and you spend your entire time trying to figure out the mystery, which there's like something, like there's something juicy about figuring it out, And so, and she does it really well. Like, some people don't do it well. She just does it so well that I want to read all her books.
Amazing.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah, that was my book.
I have a question for you. If that's the end of the...
Yeah, that's it.
So before we go and before we talk about our favorite thing, I have a question for you.
Okay.
Have you read any romance book so far this year?
You all. No, I have not. No. Thanks for calling me out once again.
No, I was, the thing is, today it's the last day of February, and
I only have 10 months left.
I know. It's interesting to look at the goals or things that you said you were going to do, blah, 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 because you have 2 months of the year have passed, and then because of something that happened these days that I won't say here, I listened to the last show or the first show of Biblio Chisme, so it reminded me of that goal of Angela, and this is an innocent question. I really wanted to know if you had made any progress in that matter.
I have not made any progress in that matter, but I have read 6 thrillers. So I am 2 books behind on my annual goal as well. I have read 15 books and am 14% into my goal.
Good.
Since you're keeping data on what I accomplished.
No, I'm not keeping any data. I was just curious. It was a natural curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have been so mysterious with your readings these days that you don't share. So I just wanted to know.
Whatever.
What's your favorite thing?
So my favorite thing this week is a documentary called LFG. It is about the U.S. women's soccer team suing the U.S. Soccer Federation for equal pay. And LFG is their like motto, and it stands for Let's Fucking Go. And I love it. And for those of you who are listening live, we played the song LFG as well. So the first song was from that documentary. And, you know, if you follow the news, this dispute has not been resolved, of course, but the fight is amazing. Like the courage to say, I am going to sue my boss. And it's such a high stakes career. Like, it's not like you can leave the US soccer team and then go play for the World Cup somewhere else, you know? So it is such a big thing. And the way that they did it is incredible. And the fact that they did it as a team, like to get a whole team of players to say, we're going to risk our career for something that we just think is right and fair is amazing. And it was, so I love the documentary. It was it made me cry. It was very emotional and inspirational to me. And, although it's sad, like it's sad that they should have to fight so hard for something that's so obvious. That's so obvious, but whatever. You know, the first legal argument that they came out to fight against it, the first official one was basically saying that women were physically inferior.
Wow.
And the head of the soccer federation in the United States resigned shortly thereafter. Duh.
Of course.
Come on. Whatever.
Interesting.
So, yeah, that's my favorite thing.
I saw a tweet today that it said something about the US, England, another country, and Australia, Switzerland, and Austria, I think, that they're fighting the same thing. Which I think it's...
Especially since it's got, it's so, in the United States, way more people watch the Women's World Cup than the men's, when they qualify. It's a huge thing here. And so to make it sound like it's not important is ridiculous. So what's your favorite thing?
My favorite thing is I don't have a particular favorite thing.
Other than me?
Because I've been in a happy place these days, so it's difficult to say. But I would say that my favorite thing is that the yellow and pink flowers called primaveras, springs, are having a second blooming this year here in Oaxaca, and it's been just amazing.
Well, that is lovely.
Yes.
Well, that's the end of our show.
Let's go.
Let's go. Let's fucking go.
Happy reading.
Happy reading. Biblio Chisme is a podcast about creating conversation around reading, satisfying curiosities we didn't know we had, and sharing this dialogue with others, preferably with good coffee, tea, and snacks.